ladies and gentlemen, this is the last session for today. And the purpose of this final panel discussion, in my opinion, is the following. First is for the speakers to kind of summarize their thought. And after listening to other people's presentation and also the questions from the floor, and maybe you change your mind. And you say, oh, what I say in the morning was wrong, now I want to update, And this is your final chance to do that. And then, number two, of course, we have a couple people here. They are, chair a session, but they don't have much time to, present their views, so we give them a few minutes. So that's number two. And number three, of course, you have lots of questions. We already have people, ready to ask questions. Last session, so he will be the first to give, questions. And I suppose not only one person to answer the questions, maybe, as you know, especially in United States, each university may have different policies, different business models, and especially Stanford usually got a lot of monies, and it is a private university, very rich, but Berkeley and my university, University of Washington in Seattle, after all, is a state university, and they are not as much money. Berkeley is still very rich, so it's a little bit different. And again, perhaps Professor Chen from National Taiwan, they want to jump in. He want to jump in and defend himself. Why Berkeley and Stanford, they have this morning. Kathy mentioned, Stanford got about 30 startups each year. And I asked Carol, she got about 15, 16 each year. My university also got about 15, 16 each year. Why National Taiwan University only got 6 in 2 years? That we can, discuss a little bit about all this, okay? So, and then, of course, very importantly, for us to summarize our observation, our thought, and so I think this is the purpose of this final panel, okay? So let's start with David. David, you have about 5 minutes, and I think it's very important for him to say something about the collaboration between academic and industry, because he happened to work for TSMC for many years, and now he's vice president and a general counsel for MediaTek. They are the two leading company in Taiwan, and I think Professor Chen also mentioned they have research center with TSMC, MediaTek, and all that. Maybe that's something at least you can mention something, and of course, among others. So David, you have about 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Professor Liu. I think I will use my 5 minutes to describe my experience in this particular subject, my experience while I was at TSMC and also at MediaTek. Generally, we have benefited significantly from collaborating with academic institutions. So we contributed to one of the research centers at National Taiwan University, and we also have ad hoc or projects with many projects with NTU, and we have project with Stanford, Berkeley, at during my TSMC days, it's one of our daily practice to work with attorneys and also managers at the OTL, and also work with professors, their students. Most companies in Taiwan, of course, we have companies' internal R&D, but we're looking at more near term, okay, because of the demand of our shareholders. Our investment in R&D has to bring results within a reasonable period of time. So I think there's a very important synergy between the industry and academia, because for the longer term research, really need to depend on the academia to look further into the future and work on some of the fundamental technologies. So we have been benefit significantly from this kind of collaboration. But I also heard that some of the questions and even some of the presentation today about COI, about these transparency issues. My experience has been that to deal with the transparency concerns is still the key word is what Professor Liu mentioned, the disclosure. When in doubt, disclose. Disclose to the independent committee or disclose to the reviewers at the institutions is the safest way to proceed, even if the rules are not completely clear. For example, we spend a lot of time talking about in the past, some of the academia institutions or some of the professors, they have some special circumstances in which their family members might have investments in one of the companies, and it's confusing. The fact that we spend 10 minutes talking about that means the rules are not fully clear about what's a dependent and what's not. And sometimes it's not just the interpretation of the rules, it's about interpretation of some even more general legal terms, like the case we mentioned about that daughter who's no longer a dependent because she's maybe 30 years old, but the argument in that case was that she was used as a nominee to hold shares for her relative. And the concept of nominee and everything is really difficult to explain or interpret, even amongst lawyers. It's a very ambiguous term. So I think to deal with that kind of ambiguity, it's safe to just disclose. I think the attack on that person in that case is really his failure to disclose, because he may have his own interpretation about how the rules should work, but later people may second guess your own interpretation of the rules. So it's always safer to just disclose before you proceed. So that's what and the same rule also applies to other subject matters in this kind of a collaboration. For example, we have a lot of issues with respect to intellectual property rights, ownership. We have some general rules, but there are exceptions, and it requires some understanding between the university and the company about who owns what. And it's always better to be clear upfront and openly discuss those issues and reach an agreement. In one of the cases where we work with a professor of a U.S. university, we actually wrote a letter to the provost of the university seeking an explanation about the university's policies before we finally signed the contract. And that has been a very successful case, because we have some issue with respect to inventions developed by the professor during a sabbatical. He's not working full-time at that time, but we're working with him on in a sabbatical period, and we want to have clarity in terms of the ownership of intellectual property rights, and we were able to have that explanation from the university before we proceed, and that has been very useful for our collaboration. So this is just one example where always disclosure and transparency is very important, and when in doubt, just disclose. These are my observations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. That's a very good comment. Nancy, please.
Thank you, Professor Liu. Hi, everybody. I'm, as I said this morning, from the Stanford SPARK program, the Translational Research Program, and I'm not sure that everyone here knows SPARK. It's certainly very prevalent here in Taiwan, with multiple universities having programs. But I'm on the researcher side in the sense that we provide seed funding to the researchers and help them de-risk their basic research project and advance it along the lines to make a product. And in our case, it's mostly therapeutics and a few diagnostics projects. The range of knowledge about IP among our Sparkies, as we call them, our investigators, ranges from clueless to having already have awarded patents by the time they actually get accepted into the SPARK program. So it's a broad range. We work very closely with Kathy's office in OTL, and in the sense that we advise our project teams about when is a good time to go talk to associates if they have not even figured out what to do yet. It's nice to have an initial conversation. They then can help them figure out when to file an invention disclosure, when to time any kind of patent applications. And we're trying to get over to convey to our investigators that just because we tell them to go talk to OTL doesn't mean that we want them to file their patent tomorrow. It's not that. It's just that they need to get the advice from the experts on what to do. So our SPARK we are now in our 11th year, and we've supported on the range of 130 projects, including about 35 or so that are currently in the portfolio. And over that time frame, we have had about 26 startup companies spin out from SPARK, and we also have a number of companies license our technologies, all of these due to the efforts of Kathy's office. The only other thing that I think I want to mention that sort of relates to the conflict of interest and the equity and licensing fees and all that kind of stuff. To come into SPARK, the main criteria are that the project is addressing an unmet medical need with a novel approach, and that we think that in the 2 or 3 years of SPARK support, we can help them advance far enough that a company would be interested in investing, whether it's a VC or another existing company to license. None of the criteria that we use to accept a project includes how much money we think they're going to make. So about a third of our projects are actually repurposed drugs. And some of them actually go on to be reformulated and are licensed and have some IP involved, but some of them can just go straight into the clinic and have a clinical trial and change clinical practice and medical practice and help patients without making any money. And for us, that is still a huge success because our criteria are helping patients, and that's the bottom line. So I thought maybe Kathy at some point might want to say a few words about some information on your website about socially responsible licensing and the practices that you follow, because it came up at lunch that actually financial gain is not one of the things you're trying to maximize for Stanford. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a mindset that's really keeping the patient in mind as the end goal.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nancy. I think now we want to give other 3 people a chance to also make some comment. And I just wanted to make a point that this morning, Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Chen, mentioned several things we probably want to keep in mind, and especially for Carol and Kathy, maybe you want to give some suggestions to people here. Remember, our topic here is talk about technology transfer, and the subtopic is talking about reducing that uncertainty, from that institutional environment. And you two already did a pretty good job talk about conflict of interest. But Minister Chen also mentioned several things this morning. He say actually from that number of patents, number of papers, citations, and the percentage of research investment, from that GDP, percentage of GDP, they're actually not that bad. But however, the output is not quite there, and the people, not that happy. And you talk about lots of activity, but we have lots of inventions, and people go to some kind of international convention, win all kind of awards. Never seen any new company come out, okay? And he was actually concerned, and remember he talked about this push and a pull and a supply and demand, and both sides seems not match. You maybe have lots of supplies, you have lots of patent, nobody wanted. And you have a whole bunch of garbage. And they try to pay all kind of application fees and maintenance fees, $1 million, faculty doesn't want to pay it. And that kind of situation. And he also mentioned that we probably have to be more careful about the policies, laws, and regulations. And also he mentioned that the infrastructure, the environment, friendliness of the environment for the technology transfer. And all this, what we call ecosystem and all that. And he's quite a bit concerned, and you guys seem doing pretty well in Silicon Valley. And he also mentioned he want to change this science and technology basic law. And you probably don't know it. Actually, that's Taiwanese version of Baidu app. And myself and Professor Paul Xu, we are the one introduced the law to Taiwan. But they didn't listen to us or didn't understand what we were saying. So in the beginning, they probably only adopt maybe 75%. And the 25% they did not adopt now cost all kind of problem. That's what happened, okay? And supposedly in United States, we all know that now is the university have the option to get the intellectual property. And you do your way. And then simply the government just, off their hand, and you do whatever you wanted, and then try to commercialize, to start a new company. But here, we are a little bit different. Since Ministry of Education, Ministry of Science, Technology, Ministry of Economic Affairs, who providing the research funding, they forgot all this law. They no longer own the intellectual property right, but they're still the owner. And so they have all kind of restrictions. They don't want you to license abroad, for instance, or give you all kind of restrictions. And they always prefer non-exclusive licensing. But for that biotech, it's very difficult, right? And so all this interpretation, narrowly interpret, like regulation also cause problem. Plus, well, actually, Minister Chen, I mentioned to him earlier, I said, well, you are interviewed by a leading magazine, and you talk about multidisciplinary training for, licensing professional. And this is kind of difficult here. And so all this, you guys have the professional, managers which work quite well. And we don't have that. And we have a whole bunch of faculties, they work very hard, but they don't have much in that industry's experience. And some are very senior. They are at the age almost retirement. So if you wanted them change mindset, remember Prime Minister saying change mindset. Well, maybe difficult. He's 65 and 70 like me, so it's very difficult. Maybe it's tough. So, what can you do? Okay? So that maybe we start from Kathy and go that direction. Kathy, this is big questions. You have to finish in 3 to 5 minutes.
Whoa. So I always feel reluctant to talk about Silicon Valley and Stanford because we are in such a unique ecosystem. And it's not the same anywhere else. It's not the same. I'm always reluctant to talk about Silicon Valley because it's so different from pretty much anywhere in the world. Even in the US, we're always considered very, very entrepreneurial. And it is a mindset. And I've been thinking about it a long time because our university was started by a businessman. Basically, Leland Stanford was a railroad person, and he made a lot of money. We had a provost that also believed in university-industry interaction. He gave Dave Hewlett and Packard $100 to start their companies. He encouraged people to start companies. So in very, very early on in Stanford's history, we were okay about industry relations. In fact, in our founding grant, the Stanford said that the students should be prepared for practical application, that they should be of service and use the knowledge in a practical way. So we've always been very practical. The venture capital community sort of sprung up in the 70s, and Stanford grew also at the same time. And there was a very much of an entrepreneurial culture. Within Stanford, there are older faculty who are not interested at all in startups. That is totally fine with Stanford. I say we support startups. We're pretty neutral as a university. Whether someone wants to do a startup or not want to do a startup, that's fine. But if someone wants to do a startup, we will support that too. And more, the Silicon Valley attracts people who want to be entrepreneurial. They become entrepreneurial, they do well, and we attract more people who want to be entrepreneurial. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What I find is that the younger students and younger faculty are all interested in startup activity. I get lots of calls from students who they come to Stanford as a freshman and they have IP and they don't want Stanford to own any of it. So, how do they manage that? So we get from students to faculty all along the way who are interested in starting a company. It's a little bit of a disease. So one of the things that I wanted to mention also from my perspective is the government is always trying to do the right thing, right? But the reality is most governments are a little bit schizophrenic. They want to create startups. I think most governments feel that, startup and new companies is the way of the future. On the other hand, they want to be sure that they make the right decision all the time. They don't want to be criticized. So they want to do startups, but they're afraid to do startups. And I think the best way to help the government is to think this through, that they have to come to a balanced perspective, that startup creation is risky. You're not always going to make the right decision. And so I also say, I've been thinking about this with the Chinese culture. All of our parents want us to be successful. They want us to have good jobs, steady jobs, make money, be successful. My brother started a company and he's a faculty at Georgia Tech. And my mother kept asking me, is he successful? Is he successful? You know, and after first year, I said, no, it's too early. After the 5th year, I said, no, it's too early. After 10 years, I said, no, it's too early. Because you don't know. It's always a different story. So I think that culturally, a lot of Chinese are afraid to take risks, high-tech risks. I mean, we're very good at small businesses, but not necessarily the high-tech risk, which is very risky. But in Silicon Valley, it's okay to take a risk and fail. We have the concept of serial entrepreneurs. Okay, you failed, but you learn something from that, and the next time you're going to learn more. And it's fine to start another company after you failed. It's not a black mark. Within many other cultures in the whole world, once you failed, that's it. You can't show your face. So again, it's very, very much a mindset. And I think it's taking generations, actually, to change it. It's not going to change overnight. But once people are successful one at a time with startups, and they still can be a good person and an ethical person, then the society will be much more used to this concept of taking risks and taking a chance. Because again, unless we bring forward these good ideas, these new ideas, society is not going to progress. And all the big companies like TSMC started once as a small company. So all the little ones, have the vision of becoming a big company. Google was a 2-person company when they started, and they're now this huge company. So again, you just have to have that passion and that drive to succeed. And it'll be hard. It's not easy to start a company, and we should support them when we can.
Carol?
It's interesting. So I think all of us consult worldwide for offices that say, you know, how do you do tech transfer in your region? And we can explain what we do in our region. We're fortunate because we have this confluence of great research universities right next to vast sources of private capital and even early capital in the form of angel investors who are the first money into the companies and really mentor those companies. And then we have, venture capital companies that invest later, completing the cycle so that we can reinvest in the research enterprise. What we always say, no matter where we go around the world, is that each unit is successful in the environment where they find themselves. I mean, clearly in Finland, people said, we don't have 2,000 biotechnology companies in our backyard to license these rights to. Can we open an office in your area? We said, you could do that, and you could approach these companies, but that would be counting your metrics as one transaction. You are saying that if you get a license with California companies, that's a success, whereas your metric should be, how relevant are you to your local innovation ecosystem? In fact, in our office, too, there isn't a focus on making money on licensing because licensing comes last almost in a series of events that we try to orchestrate to help the faculty to get funding, to do very important corporate-sponsored research before anything is invented so that interesting things can be invented in the future. And so that we can help these companies that pay taxes to the state capital find a solution to the problem that they have now, which is that when the going gets tough in a company, they cut their R&D lab, the lab where the fun stuff happens, where the blue sky speculative research happened with no apparent immediate commercial potential. The first company that articulated that problem to us, Intel, said, it's just too bad, but the management has cut this off. What we want to do is open a research lab across the street from a great school of engineering, share our chips with you, you can share your students and faculty with us. Let's see how we can optimize this process of open innovation, where neither of us is working on something that's close to commercially relevant products, but we're both innovating in the space before anyone files a patent. And in fact, if either Intel or Berkeley were to file a patent, that would indicate that that project is too commercial to continue to be worked on in this open collaborative environment. And that precedent was followed by industry-sponsored institutes. And again, companies were simply saying, we can't do everything in-house. So, and we don't own all the smart people in our industry. How can we leverage what we have and what we do by collaborating effectively with a research university while maintaining our mission, letting them maintain their mission, and at the end of the day, eventually in the future, creating products and services that are core to our mission. All of these ways of thinking about how best to innovate and how to innovate on the process of innovation is done by people who don't just count one metric or another, the number of patents, the number of licenses, the number of startups, the amount of equity in the startups. They're thinking about bigger metrics like your relevance to your ecosystem or your impact. So impact can even be non-remunerative. I mean, when you think of all of the software that we have licensed out of UC Berkeley under the Berkeley Software Distribution License, which is an open source license, more companies have gone faster and used that code without any gate, any license, or anything longer than it takes to click, I agree on this license, than we could count in terms of traditional metrics. And that's okay. Our offices aren't organized to measure that kind of impact, but it's indisputable that the research has had that kind of impact, and it was not reflected in our office. Even though we clear software for open source distribution, it's not included. The other thing that is traditionally not included when people put up numbers is that if you have a good reputation of being relevant to your local innovation ecosystem and to companies, you will get more gifts, because one of the metrics for being a good partner or having successful relationships is gifts, not just from companies or from successful entrepreneurs, but from everyone. I mean, we could even approach a foundation that says, we like what you're doing in the developing world, helping poor people or helping people who are suffering from neglected tropical diseases, and we will give a grant and or a gift simply because we want to validate. We agree with what you're doing. So also, on the vector that people usually talk about, going from discovery to translation, or to discovery to development and translation, it's often talked about as a linear process. But we don't think it's linear. It is definitely cyclical. And any input at any point in that system can perpetuate the cycle. And all of us have to reach across boundaries, across offices, across divisions, across the public-private divide to keep that cycle of innovation going. I think I've said enough right now.
Okay. Okay, Professor Chen.
Okay, thank you. I would like to talk about three things. The first thing is to answer the question Professor Liu raised at the beginning of this session. That is why Stanford and UC Berkeley, they got many, more than 10 or even more, startup each year, and NTU, we just got 6 in the past 2 years. Excuse me. The reason is that, first, when I talk about this number, that's it formally registered, okay, through the second track of our, regulation. And so here we say that we have 2 tracks. The second track now we execute started from 2 years ago, that we want to get equity from the case, okay, not the money, the real money, okay. So we can say that there are break numbers here, okay. So each year we got 30 or more technology licensing cases, okay. So you can say that the break number is maybe several times of the formally registered, getting the stakes instead of the real money through the technology licensing cases. Okay, so that's the answer to the Professor Liu. Of course, we still need to do more to convince our faculties that they can do the university startups either through technology licensing track or through the equity track. Okay, And if they go the second track, we can solve the technology stock issues. Okay, if they go the first track, they just get the technology licensing from the university, and they can use the technology legally. So we now have 2 tracks, and we hope that we can do more to help our faculty, okay, to do their university startups through either 2 ways or either ways. Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that NTU, we try to benchmark Stanford, UC Berkeley. They are doing very well, and they are our benchmark. And as I present before, our plan is first, the short-term goal of our plan is to establish a complete so-called 三创 campus. Okay, 创意、创新、创业. So in English, that's creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship campus. Okay, and to make this goal achieved, so we need to integrate the resources and capacities in our universities. Okay, we have, as you see in my slide, we have CIAC, we have Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center, we have Design School, we have many research centers. So we need to think about how to integrate the resources and the capacities among all these units, so that we can do things more efficiently and effectively. And secondly, we need to make our process, administrative process, and the related regulations become more feasible. Okay, so that our faculty and their teams, they can being treated fairly, so that they can have incentive to go all along the process on the campus. And the third thing that we need to think about, just like what Professor Liu mentioned, that we need to attract real professionals, okay, or high-level professionals like Carol and like Katharine, okay. So if we can attract these, real and high-level professionals into the campus, then, as you know, that I'm part-time, job on this position, okay. My real position is, the management faculty, okay. So I teach, in this building, okay. I spend, some of, I would say a lot of my time, more than I expected to serve this job. Okay, so I spend more time in this job than, in teaching and research. And now, I'm getting worried about my research after I serve, this position. Okay, so fortunately now, the Ministry of Science and Technology, Mr. Chen, he tried to break the limits, so that now we are allowed to use better salary, okay, to attract those high-level professionals like you, in Taiwan, your colleague in Taiwan, so they can be attracted into campus. Hopefully, we can do more. And the other things is we need to attract more investors and the companies. They come to the campus and see, and review our, cases, so that they are willing to invest, in our, our faculty and their teams. Okay, and the fourth thing that we need to, strengthen is that we need to think about our industry affiliate program. I think Stanford and Berkeley, they are doing very well. And during lunch, we talk about this, and we talk about whether NTU we should have centralized industry affiliate program or decentralized, like what Stanford and UC Berkeley now they are doing. Okay, so we have a very good discussion about this, and I thank Carol and Katharine. They just provide very good insights, so that when we do the planning about the industry affiliated program, we can adopt their suggestions. Okay, and we also need to strengthen our technology transfer capacity. And so far, we have 6 licensing managers. Okay, they are good. Okay, they come from they came from outside. But I have a discussion about this because before they come to the campus, they are wolf. After they come into the campus, they becoming I would say 狼犬, how to say that? Very like wolf, right? Okay, and then after a long period of time, they become dog, the house dog or home dog. Okay, they become very comfortable, about the environment, of campus. So that's a real institutional problem. Why, a wolf become a house dog? They are very, they have high energy when they, serve, in a company. But why they become not so, energetic? So we need to solve this problem because we have institutional problem, here. Okay. All right. So that's the second thing. In the long term, NTU, we want to not just serve our faculty members, in NTU. We also want to think that as a leading company in Taiwan, maybe when we establish our system well and serve our faculty well, maybe we should serve other universities around us. Okay, because in Taiwan we have a very critical problem is that we don't have critical mass for a specific university. Okay, so how can we build up the critical mass? That's a very, very changeable issue. Okay, so for NTU, we need to establish ourselves well, equip ourselves well, and then we may need to serve other universities around us, and we encourage other universities who have who are willing to cooperate with NTU. Or we welcome you to talk with us, then we can do things. And maybe we can talk with the government, say, hey, we can have an alliance, right, to serve all of us, not just for one specific universities, okay? And the third thing I want to mention is that, yes, just like Katharine mentioned in her presentation, the ultimate goal of CIAC and NTU is to increase the contribution and the impact of NTU, okay? So that's the first goal we need to think about when we do the innovation and the entrepreneurship, okay? And then the second goal is to protect our faculty members, okay? So when they do those R&D, cooperation, and when they do the startup, university startup, we need to protect them and not to let them, be trapped in the illegal issues. That's the second goal we need to achieve. And the final goal, the third goal is to self-sustain our operation. Okay, so that's the thing I think we need to clarify, and then we need to think about the mission of the university is to contribute and to impact the society. I hope this goal, from Katharine's presentation, I think that's a very important point we need to clarify. Yeah, here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Professor Zhang has been waiting for a long time to ask questions. And Professor Zhang is from Cheng-Kung University. I think you are going there sometimes. Thursday. Yeah. And they are the leading university in the South. And so, please.
I would prefer to say NCQ is one of the leading universities in Taiwan, not just in the South. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, I mean, I got tons of questions here, but I mean, let me just raise one, because I'm kind of surprised to hear that you say when the faculty, his current research is related to his, interest, financial interest in company, you ask him to change his research subject. Why not just, let him have the second licensing when he has some real outcomes there, okay? Then he can have the second licensing. Otherwise, he will waste his, accumulate technology or to do something else, okay? It would be best to serve, what he's familiar with. Okay, this is the person. And the same way, when you say that the inventor should not take in the clinical trial, okay, should not involve in the clinical trial. Again, if we monitoring carefully, okay, for the protocol, because we already set up the protocol there. Because I think one of the advantages of the inventor to take part into the clinical trials, if it failed or if something's wrong, he was the first one to identify, okay, because he knows the principle or something else. He has the advantage to join this kind of program. Why do you say, for these two issues here, will it be the COI be too much important to overemphasize it? So you might lose some advantage to have this person involved. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kathy, that's for you.
For the clinical trial, I know you think the faculty inventor would identify the problem faster. We're worried that they won't identify the problem. And that they'll think, oh, this was an odd piece of data, let's discard that. So we don't let them analyze the results either. With a clinical trial, again, there is some recipe. Almost anybody can follow the recipe. You give the dosage every 2 days or whatever it is, and then the results are analyzed through blood tests, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think you need the special skills of the inventor. We've had a situation where it's a medical device that only the inventor feels they can do. In that situation, we may allow that, but then also try to manage the conflict in a different way. Because again, if it's such a special procedure that only the inventor can do, maybe that is the only way we can develop the technology. But of course, in the future, you can't have an invention that only the inventor can do. You have to be able to transfer it to other people. With respect to changing their research, this was only in one particular case, and I can describe it as they were doing research on one very particular part of the battery. And if they kept doing research in that area, all the inventions would go to this person's startup company. It would become a circular pipeline. We definitely do not want the university to become the research arm of a company. And so we just asked this person whether they'd be willing to change their research emphasis to another part of the battery. It's not like they have to get out of the whole field entirely. And this particular inventor was fine about that. So the focus of their research was just slightly different.
Well, what if you could get another license to the startup company if you do have some outcome in the related domain there? You can have a second license or third license?
They can have a first or second or third license. We worry more and more if a lot of the faculty inventions go to one company. So usually in such case, we might give the first license as exclusive and even maybe the second or third technology. But if it becomes very many technologies going to this one company, we would probably say this should be non-exclusively licensed.
Okay, this is a very good chance. And today all the questions are free. Started tomorrow, we're going to charge people, okay? Any? Okay, good.
I have some question for our honor guest from United States because I'm going to give a question not from Taiwan's point of view, Taiwan's perspective, because I have been working very closely with the Israeli company. Okay, from your American perspective, how different you are from Israeli university or the research institute in terms of the output just mentioned by the Professor Paul, who has been my teacher, teaching us the technology transfer and management. So from Europe, my question for you is, why we have been hearing that Israeli company very successful in terms of their innovation or originality, while Taiwan is not so advanced compared with them. And also, we heard that Silicon Valley has been famous in this regard. I mean, in terms of the innovation, while Israeli company or Israeli university also very famous from other aspect. Okay, so would you share your point of view with us? Why you, where are the difference in between Israeli university and company and the company in Silicon Valley and the two university that you serve? Thank you.
So how about Stanford or Berkeley? Have you have any chance to work together with either industry or university in Israel?
I mean, we have what we call joint inventions with some Israeli universities, and either we'll handle it or they will handle it. I think Israelis are very driven, and they're very entrepreneurial, and they move quickly. They're a small, very small country. And so I do think that they're very insistent on trying to do startup activities. I think one of the things, I don't know so much about Taiwan, but for example, Korea. They have these big companies. Once you have really big companies and not an infrastructure of small companies, then many times people aren't as innovative because they're sort of relying on the big company for university industry relations. In Silicon Valley, the big companies that we have, really people can remember when they were small companies, except maybe for Hewlett-Packard, which was pretty big when I first started. I mean, we had Cisco, we had Sun. Those were startup companies when I started at Stanford. VMware, small company. Google, non-existent. So all of the companies that I can even remember and that most of you think about now are really new. They started young. And again, Apple too was very small. So our recent memory is of small companies becoming large.
I don't have a lot of detail about the Israeli system, but I am under the impression that they have more access to proof of concept funding. Before startups even leave the university, there are more funds just to help a project, with the last $100,000 or $200,000, to try to make a prototype. And that's money that's very valuable to all of us. It's really something that I think is extremely not only is coming at the right time, but it's really a good investment because it's right in the sweet spot. But for the proof of concept funding, would some of these companies actually be able to pop out of the university? How they finance that, I don't know. But I do think that that is a vital piece of this vector towards value creation. I also wanted to say that I don't think that organizing entrepreneurial activities and programs and infrastructure in a top-down manner is the best thing for entrepreneurship. Because why are there 80 centers having to do with entrepreneurship at Berkeley? It's because it arises from the passion and drive of individuals. I mean, there are some clubs that are so unique, it's only for female physicists who are entrepreneurs. Would any university say, we're going to create 80 of these, and this is what they'll be named, and this is what they'll be do? No, because entrepreneurship is driven by individuals, and honestly, it's that kind of initiative and development that we don't want to stifle with top-down management strategies or top-down structures. What we think we should do is bottom-up facilitation just help where we're needed, but not try to orchestrate this, because entrepreneurship is organic. And we also have more funding to try to organize our programs that you mentioned so that we can create the pipeline. We can both expand the pipeline and make things going through the pipeline go faster. So.
I want to give a shout out to Nancy. SPARK was just an idea of a faculty member. She came back from sabbatical. She had tried to start a company and realized that she didn't know a lot when she first went into this effort to start a company, and she wanted to share her effort with other faculty at Stanford, faculty and students. So she created SPARK, and out of SPARK has come many Sparkies and Sparkers out there. So again, it's the passion. I agree with Carol completely that it's a bottoms up.
Okay. We have some people, even though our time is there, but this will be a final question, and make it, very short. And it has to be no stupid questions, just very smart questions.
Can I respond to Carol's suggestion? I totally agree with Carol's suggestion that entrepreneurship should be, bottom up. Yeah, and what we discussed, during lunchtime is that because like MOST now they just have want us to submit a proposal about the so-called international affiliate program, and they want the university to submit a proposal instead of research centers to submit a proposal. And what we now to think about is that for NTU now we already have 2 research centers that they have their own affiliate industry affiliate program. So how can we increase more research center to have this kind of industry affiliate program? Then these kind of metrics that CIAC and the Innovation and the Entrepreneurship Center and the D-School, how can we provide services in terms of education program, in terms of administration procedure, in terms of the accelerator capacity, so that we can have kind of metrics. Okay, and the industrial affiliate program, started from the research center, and from the university, those units like CIAC, the design school, and the innovation and the entrepreneurship center, they can provide general service to them. So that's kind of the thing that we think about. So thank you very much for the input, and that will help us to do better planning for the proposal. Good. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, final question, please.
My question is quite simple. It's regarding the evaluation. What's the methodology in Stanford or Berkeley to evaluate the value of technology? Thank you.
Oh, that's $1,000 questions. Kathy or Carol?
We think that the value of a patent is the commercial potential of the patent, and that the licensee will realize that or not. But in terms of structuring a license, we're not trying to capture the value up front. We're trying to create an incentive for a company to take the license and make the necessary investment of time and money over many years. So we try to make the license fees of the barrier to entry low to get them involved. If it's an exclusive license, we try to make sure that they're diligent in commercializing a product, and we're just patient. Later, if they do well, we'll get milestone payments or royalties, but we cannot try to extract what we think is the value up front, especially from a startup, because they're cash poor. But really across the US and Canada, most of the startup licenses are fairly standardized in terms of fees and the amount of equity taken. I think no university is getting really rich deals from startups. They're cash poor but equity rich, and there are little chicks, that have incubated in our incubators, little chicks that have hatched out of the eggs. We want them to keep coming back to the mothership, to the university, for whatever they need, no matter how big they grow. we want to help them at this stage, and there are many startup companies that have grown up to sponsor research or even create one of the 4 industry-sponsored institutes, research institutes at Berkeley. We want to keep them, close to the nest and to continue to be relevant to them and to have them participate in networks of networks that keep the whole innovation system going, not just license from us continually. And that's the holistic view of how you should look at industry relations from a university. That a license is good, it's fine, but it's one of 12 ways that we hope the company will interact with us over 10 years.
Okay.
I will just give you the cynical answer, which is the value of a technology is what somebody's willing to pay. By negotiation.
Okay, our time's up. I only have a couple things to say. That number one, it looks like for the people who try to start up a company, always think about risk, right? And risk and uncertainty and all that. That's why we are talking about all this today. But, well, I think Kathy also gave us answer. Yes, there's a certain way to minimize the risk, but you're not going to have 100% risk-free. Most startups fail in few years, right? So you have to make a decision. You cannot always stay in a very comfortable zone, like Professor Chen was talking about, okay? And you're going to always have to have uncertainty. Otherwise, we all will be millionaires, every one of us. So we just have to face it, okay? This is what I see from all of your presentation. And we want to give final time to make a conclusion to Dr. Zhuang. And I will, before that, I will congratulate. I'm going to say that this is very successful, and I congratulate for that organizer. And I hope we have this, every year or every other years. And remember, they're all from California. United States is not just California. There are a lot of good people from Seattle. There are a lot of good people from New England. So maybe each year you want to invite them from different area. That give us different models or different thinkings. That will be only my suggestion. Okay? Thank you very much, all the panelists.